Good evening. I'd like to call the May 22nd, 2024 Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Dodson?
Present.
Mr. Mastriani?
Present.
Mrs. Galucci?
Present.
Mr. Schlag?
Present.
And Mrs. Collins?
Present.
5 present.
Thank you, Ms. Marco. A quorum is present. Mr. Godlewski, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For anyone who has not attended a town board meeting and wishes to speak, excuse me, either at a public hearing or under privilege of the floor, I ask you to please sign the sign-in sheet that's located by the entrance. If you do not sign the sheet, you will not be able to speak. And I also want to tell you that at the end of the night, we will be going into an executive session. We will have conducted all of our business, including liaison and miscellaneous from the board. You're welcome to stay if you want, but it is on a personnel issue with the invited guest of Elaine Gold, Esquire. Okay? So with that, we'll now open public hearing number 1 for the clerk will read.
For receipt of comment on the proposed introductory local law blank of 2024 to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the town code to reduce the allowable building height to 2 stories up to 30 feet in height in the Main Street Neighborhood Center MS/NC overlay district.
Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Let's see. No, there's not.
Okay. If there's nobody here that wishes to speak, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Do that twice, you have to do that more than once if we good.
For public hearings, I would open it up if somebody didn't have time or didn't know to sign up for the public hearing. Well, the public hearing is different than privilege of the floor.
I've been advised by counsel, just in case someone out there wanted to speak on public hearing number 1 and didn't know enough to, sign up ahead, maybe it's the first time they've spoken, that they will be allowed to speak. So is there anybody who wishes to speak on public hearing number 1? Okay. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes to close the public hearing.
Public hearing number 1 is closed. Next is public hearing number 2. The clerk will read.
For receipt of comment on the proposed introductory local law blank of 2024 to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the town code to extend the existing Main Street Neighborhood Center MS/NC overlay district from the intersection of Curry Road and Guilderland Avenue North to the boundary with the city of Schenectady.
Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak on public hearing number 2?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, and I will extend the same courtesy as I did for public hearing number 1. Is there anyone who wishes to speak about this, but being new to the system, didn't understand, and would like to speak? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Schlag. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes to close the public hearing.
Okay, public hearing number 2 is closed. Our next public hearing is public hearing number 3. The clerk will read.
For receipt of comment on the proposed introductory local law blank of 2024 to adopt Chapter Section 271 entitled Hotel Use Regulations of the Town Code of the Town of Rotterdam.
Ms. Marco, is there anyone who signed up to speak on public hearing number 3?
No.
Okay. Again, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in public hearing number 3?
How you doing? Some of you know me, some of you don't. Jim Lundy from Curry Road. I was gone for a couple of months. I was out of town, but I'm finally glad to see you guys did something about Hotel 8. I spoke to a lot of friends of mine who were I was in the fire department, and a lot of friends were. And they were telling me, and if you can call the chief up about it, Hotel 8 is nothing but a fire trap waiting to go up. It's infested. They'll take a hot plate out of the room, go to Walmart next day, buy another one, and do it all over again. I'm finally glad to see you guys are doing something. I think you should pass this bill for today because you got the situation under control now. They're gone. But if you give them a crack, they'll get back in there. I think you should vote on it tonight or as soon as you can, get it done and move on from it. If you have to amend it, like the nurses or the construction workers, I belong to another fire department. We had to make so many department meetings. A lot of guys worked at night. Very simply, you got a letter from your employer that he can't, he needs to stay there more than 30 days, more than 28 days, whatever you have to do. Not like they, those people just stay in there. But I'm saying there are all ways around a lot of this stuff that I know, like I said, you give them a crack, they'll sneak right back in there. Thank you for doing something finally.
What was your last name, sir? I'm sorry.
Lundy, L-U-N-D-Y.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on public hearing number 3? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to close public hearing number 3.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
No.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 no.
Motion passes. We'll now move on to privilege of the floor. Ms. Marco, is there someone who would like to speak on the privilege of the floor?
Marlene Whitehead?
And I will remind everybody, you have 4 minutes, right around 3.5 minutes. If you look at me once in a while, I'll raise my hand at 3.5 minutes and then kind of wind up your statement.
Okay, I'm just coming off, I don't know when 4 minutes is. So, my name's Marlene Whitehead, and I'm here with my husband, Johnny Whitehead, on behalf of ourselves and our neighbors on Princetown Road. We live at 1276 Princetown Road, not far from the intersection of Burdick Street and Princetown, where the fairly new apartments are, where the soon-to-be gym is, where the soon-to-be 2 new corners full of storage buildings, and also the soon-to-be electrical cable that's coming from Canada to New York City. So I spoke to one of the managers or project managers that are going to be working on that cable, and he informed me that they are going to cut all of the trees and all of the shrubs on Princetown Road. We are upset, my neighbors and I. We have been trying to grow stuff over there for years since we lived there, and the trees and the shrubbery give us somewhat of a buffer, not just from the trains, but mostly from the 4-wheelers and the dirt bikes that kick up dust and noise, and we have no privacy. So when I spoke to him about cutting all the trees down and asked if you're going to replace any of the greenery, he said it's not our responsibility, it's responsibility of the railroad, or he wasn't sure. So I'm wondering if there's something we can do to, improve the aesthetics of that. It's going to be awful when they cut all that greenery down. It's awful just when they mow. So when they take all the trees and shrubbery down, I'm afraid it's going to be, devastating to our neighborhood. The whole character of our neighborhood is gone. And I get progress, when I moved there was no mall and no way tours and no stewards, and there was just turkeys and deer, and so I get progress, but I just think this is something that needs to be addressed. So, anyway, on behalf of my neighbors and ourselves, we wanted to make you aware of the situation. Thank you.
Where are you in Princetown again? I'm sorry, where exactly are you located?
I am between Burdick and Putnam.
Okay.
About halfway to the cemetery or halfway to the intersection.
Okay.
But I understand the whole street of I don't know about the other side. I didn't talk to those neighbors. I only talked to people on my side. And I don't know on their own personal property what's going to happen to those trees, but the ones on the side of the railroad tracks are going to be removed, I understand. So I thought they were going to come and dig a trench just open up the ground and lay this cable in, and he said that's impossible. So, but thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Sabate?
Hi, I'm Kathleen Salvati from 112 Rotterdam Street. I have a couple questions for Resolution 234. That's the seasonal park attendants. Do we know how many park attendants we're appointing to each park in Rotterdam? Are we not allowed to ask questions?
You can, we'll answer it, but not during your time.
Oh,
We enter it under miscellaneous.
Because it's privilege of the floor.
Right.
That's your privilege.
Yeah.
okay. So I'll wait because I have a lot of questions. Thank you.
No.
If you don't answer your questions here, we
You have to
cannot
ask them
answer
now
them.
so
You
they
should-
can answer.
You ask
them
them,
now.
I'll answer later.
I'm sorry. I know it-
okay.
Just explain it.
Yep.
All right. The number of park attendants for each park, the age of park attendants, will they be first aid CPR certified? With that, are they going to be under the supervision of Rotterdam Police Department? And with Rotterdam Police Department, there was an incident at a park a couple weeks back, and we had 4 officers show up at the park, and there were only 4 officers in uniform that night because they're short-staffed. Is there anything in the budget to hire more officers? They're my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Godlewski?
Good evening. I gotta be careful of my time here, I've been warned. First of all, I want to thank the board. In February, we increased the senior exemption. I haven't been able to get here, but I do appreciate that. And I will not qualify for that, but I know a lot of other people will. So, why am I here tonight? And I'm gonna ask you to amend the town code. And the subject matter is training. And I know there's a couple of new town board members. And just to give you a little history, 13 years ago, we updated a town code when I was on the board, and to mandate the planning commission and zoning board members get trained once a year. At section 270, 177, 270, 179. And the reason we did that, prior to that, it wasn't uncommon that you would be on the zoning board or the planning commission for 20 or 25 years. And as we all know, when things change in the town, there was a big turnover. And when you have turnover on those two committees, you lose a lot of experience and knowledge. I know because I was on for 5 years. And the other thing is, the reason we wanted the training, I see there's some zoning changes tonight. We wanted to be able to say in defense of a zoning change that we train our people. All right, because not a lot of towns mandate that. I'm going to give the town clerk a section of the code, she can distribute it. And that was the prime reason we did it. All right? It's mandatory, and they can be, how should we say, taken off the board. All right? I mean, it's that serious, and you know, a lot of people don't understand that we train our people for when it comes to you. All right, you have the knowledge you need to make a decision. On the reverse side, in the town code, there's nothing in there for town board members to get trained. I learned the hard way 17 years ago. Believe me when I tell you, I think Diane was on board with me. I learned the hard way. And it shouldn't be that way. I know the responsibility you have, and I would suggest, recommend, and it's your decision, that you amend your town code to put training in there at a minimum for new board members. And if you decide that the board members should be trained every year, that's your decision. But I think with the issues you have today, all right, are a lot different than there was here 20 years ago. And you have to be informed, and you have to be able to defend those decisions when somebody comes up here and questions your decision. How much time do I have, Molly?
Minute and 30 seconds.
Well, I will take a minute and 30 seconds, but on the one resolution regards the hotel, and I know I should have signed up onto the other thing, but I didn't. When that project was approved in 1998, okay, it was approved as a hotel. And I've been reading, and I know the decisions you have to make. It was not approved as a housing project. And that's basically what it's turned into. All right? I've had some discussions with the supervisor, which I'm not going to go into. She knows my feelings on it, but you're the people that have to make those decisions. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Donna. Actually, I'll get them. Brenda Terosian.
Good, how are you?
Here. Brenda, Rotterdam. A couple things. First of all, the tree over here on Sunrise, when you come in this door, there's a stop sign. Twice I went past it because the limbs are over the stop sign. So maybe you can get somebody in the highway department to trim the tree down a little bit, because I don't want to get a ticket coming here. Motel 8. And I got a few questions about Motel 8. These violations that all of a sudden showed up on the door. How long were they in violation? How long has that place been in violation? I know you're not going to answer me. You could, but how long has it been? Has there been violations before the immigrants came in here? Because you also had people from the veterans and stuff living there. Well, there was no problem there. And the other thing is that gentleman who owns Motel 8. Is he being fined for these issues? Is the town going to fine him? Number two, I got to bring up, and I'm sorry, I know you don't want to hear this, but I ran into a couple of residents who were very happy about the airport. We got our money back. We got this is the residents. We got $750,000 back. And I had to school them because this is what you guys are saying. We got $1 million of ARPA money back. The $250,000, and I hope everybody in here and on YouTube is listening, that $250,000 that we gave the airport as a gift, because we're supposed to give them rent, which we did not have to, was taxpayers' money. And that's very important to know. And I'll keep bringing that up every so often. It did not come out of the ARPA money, and I'm a little hurt. Last week you gave your people documentation, great work they're doing. For a year I kept hearing from you people that if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't have gotten $1 million back. So where's my little bit of recognition? Just saying. Again, Water District 5. I'm just going to talk about my district. I don't care about the junction anymore. They don't come to the meetings to defend their problems. I can't worry about them. District 5. I'm going to assume, and maybe I shouldn't, that you aren't going to go after any grants for District 5. Because you already lost 2. And the people have to understand here in District 5, it's not because we want the fire hydrant, oh, not the fire, the meters. It is something that was signed with DEC, that we have to have water meters if the town wanted to increase their volume of consumption to 10 million to 12 million to take care of Gilderland, which would get paid peanuts for. Trim those, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lundy, did you want to speak again on general?
No.
Okay, so to make sure, that's it.
All right, then we'll be closing privilege of the floor, and we'll move on to our resolution. Our first resolution is Resolution 220 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
Accepting town board meeting minutes.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution number 221 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
To adopt a negative declaration on change of zone application from single-family R1 and retail business B1 to general business B2 located at High Bridge Road, Mercer Avenue, and Sherman Street.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 222 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law number 8 of 2024 to amend chapter 270 zoning of the town code relating to a change of zone from single-family residential R1 and retail business B1 to general business B2 for property located at High Bridge Road, Mercer Avenue, and Sherman Street.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Madam Supervisor, again, I'd like to thank our public, all the residents who came out, asked some very good questions, demanded good information. I'd also like to thank the representatives from Stewart's again. I think they were here for 2 public hearings. Really allowed us to vet this development and that community. I think as part of that process, we were able to give the public what I would consider is good information. They may not necessarily were in agreement with the information. Again, the point of the public hearing is to weigh all the options, pro and con, and I thought that it was done very well. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say under discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
No.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 no.
Resolution passes. Resolution 223 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
To adopt a negative declaration to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the town code to reduce the allowable building height in the Main Street Neighborhood Center MS/NC overlay district.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Mrs. Galucci, seconded. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 224 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law number 9 of 2024 to amend chapter 270 zoning of the town code to reduce the allowable building height in the Main Street Neighborhood Center MSNC overlay district.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Schlag. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlag?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 225 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To adopt a negative declaration to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the Town Code to extend the existing Main Street Neighborhood Center MSNC overlay district from the intersection of Curry Road and Guilderland Avenue North to the boundary with the city of Schenectady.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I heard Mr. Mastriani first. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 226 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law 10 of 2024 to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the Town Code to extend the existing Main Street Neighborhood Center MSNC overlay district from the intersection of Curry Road and Guilderland Avenue North to the boundary with the city of Schenectady.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Schwab. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. The next resolution is Resolution 227 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law 11 of 2024 to adopt Chapters 271 entitled Hotel Use Regulations.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Ron.
Ron, make the
Ron
motion.
should have first.
Yep.
Was it
Mr.
Ron?
Schlag? Yeah,
Yes.
Mr. Schlag made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 228 of the year 2024. The clerk will read.
Call for bids for 6.3 millimeter polymer modified hot mix asphalt highway resurfacing.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 229 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
Call for bids for mill and fill with 6.3 polymer modified hot mix asphalt highway paving.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 230 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
Revisions to mercury limits in Chapter 230 sewers.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Who's that?
That was
Ron,
pretty insane.
we'll get Ron.
Okay.
Okay, motion by Mr. Schwab. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. Clerk, I'm sorry, on the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 231 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To approve budget transfers of gas and diesel to the 2024 budget.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 232 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with KD Engineering and Architecture, PC, for the professional engineering services dated to the mercury minimization plan.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Galucci. Clerk, on the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 233 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To appoint Michael Isabella to the position of Traffic Safety Coordinator.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 234 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To appoint seasonal park attendants to the Parks Department.
Is there any discussion?
Should we clarify that the attendants aren't stationed in the parks, but instead are floating around to the various parks, mainly, picking up waste and debris and mowing the lawn, weed whacking? The term attendant is, should I say, archaic or outdated?
It's me.
They're not the way it was when I was a kid, back by the dinosaurs, where we put attendants in every park and the neighborhood children walk to the park. Obviously, I'm not sure we're living in the same world as that. So when we call them park attendants, it's just that they're the ones who take care of all the grounds for our parks and cemeteries. And if we are going to answer the question, we cannot hire anybody under the age of 18. It's an insurance risk or liability, because they would be using weed whackers, lawn mowers, things like that. So for the town's insurance, the people have to be 18 years of age or older. As far as officers and how many they have, the park attendants, they work out of our Department of Public Works. There's a supervisor that works with them, and then they fall under the head of the Department of Public Works. As far as the police department, I usually work, all of us, I shouldn't say I, all of us work very closely with Chief Brown, and we make sure that his minimal staffing is always met. As far as I know, it is met. So I can't say, I wouldn't speak for the chief as to how many officers are on patrol at any given time. So that's something that I can give you the information and put you in touch with Chief Brown. But like I say, the board has always, even the previous board, we have always worked with the chief of police to make sure that his mandatory staffing was up and available, unless, God forbid, they had an injury or an illness that was taking somebody off of active duty. Okay.
It's always helpful to report any suspicious activity or anything that you witness when you see it to the police department. They welcome that kind of information. It helps them do their job.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Mastriani, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 235 of the year 2024, the clerk will read.
To appoint seasonal laborers to the Highway Department.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Schwab. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
5 yes.
Resolution passes. Resolution 236 has my, even though we're not doing anything with them, this particular resolution contains my husband's name, so I will be turning over the meeting to Mr. Dodson, and I will leave the dais.
And then I will recuse myself as well, since Megan is in this same resolution.
Clerk to read.
To amend Resolution 18.24 of the year 2024, appoint Latifa Relang as the part-time clerk.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion was made by Council Member
Galucci?
Galucci, thank you.
I'll second the motion.
That was made by Council Member Joe Mastriani. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab? You're recused, and Mrs. Collins recused, correct?
Yes.
So
Resolution passed.
3 yes and 2 recused. You're good, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
That concludes our resolutions for the night. So we will now move on to liaison reports. Do any of the board members have anything they wish to say under liaison?
Molly, I had a really busy day on Monday. It was a great day. And so as some of you know, we've been talking about a lot of the great committees that we've formed. And one that's sort of in the works, Ron and I will be working with businesses and with local committees, and I have the government agencies. So, you know, behind the scenes, we've been really trying to look at what our businesses need before we form anything and just talk to all the right people. But I spent a lot of time with the chamber, and you know, as I started to look at our communications, the one thing that's really clear is that we're sort of invisible as a town, Rotterdam is. So, you know, the first order of business is to say, who are our partners, who are the stakeholders in our success, and how can we help the businesses thrive? And so I've been meeting with the chamber quite often, just trying to figure out what we can do for our local businesses, what sort of backbone they have that, you know, and programs that we can bring to our businesses. So, you know, that's going very well. I think they're a great team, and they're very open to doing whatever they can to help. We're also looking at modeling some of the programs after other towns that have been very successful with their programs, kind of in the same situation that we're in, and have moved forward in a real positive manner. We have Discover Schenectady. You know, now I have a login at the chamber, so we can start to promote some of our businesses and the good events that are occurring. The other event that I just attended was like a half day, was the future of New York State's downtowns. And, you know, meeting with the folks there was a lot of people from the state, from state agencies. Ray Gillen was there, the mayors were there. People were really bringing ideas to the table, talking about funding, and so it was a real terrific day. And so, you know, as we move forward, it gives us a lot of ideas as we meet with our businesses to kind of think through how can we get funding, and what would we need to do to be a smarter community, and then how can we help our businesses. So as we move forward, we'll be developing committees. I'm just trying to do a lot of the homework on the back end before we start that. And Ron and I will work very closely together to get that going, and to bring all the right people to the table. So, and again, if anyone out there who's listening to this wants to get involved, this is the beginning, and this is where we're just starting to think through. We're going to need people in communications, we're going to need business leaders, anything at all that you can bring to the table. You know, you saw the positive way that our energy committee stepped up and has helped us, and that's a lot of hours. And we have a conservation committee who meets frequently and does some pretty terrific things. So this will be another opportunity for our community to step up. So I encourage, you know, anybody who's interested, we'd love to get some young people involved. We love the wisdom of, you know, the elders in our community. So reach out to me, and you know, catch me after a meeting, call, whatever needs to occur. But if you sign up, you know, we're at the forefront of what we can do for all of our businesses in our community. So I encourage everybody to take part.
Anyone else have anything that they wish to say under the liaison report?
Madam Supervisor, yes. Reminder, lead line service inventory meeting for Water District Number 5 is not here tomorrow. Not here tomorrow. It's at the Senior Center. There's a conflict with that meeting with the parade that we're having. We originally sent out a mailer that said we were going to have the meeting here. That meeting will not be here because you probably won't be able to get here. You need to come to the Senior Center at 7 o'clock. I will be there. The engineering consultant will be there. We're going to talk about lead line services. If you think you have a lead line service, we recommend that you come to the meeting. We'll give you all sorts of good information. For those that think they have a copper water service and don't need to be bothered, we still request that you guys go on our website. There's a link there. Just fill out the questionnaire. It takes literally less than probably a minute and a half. The only thing we ask is for a photo, just documenting your service so that we have it for the record. It does not take very long to do. help us get the lead outs. The more information we get back from our residents regarding their services, the better we can report to the EPA of where we stand on lead services within the town of Rotterdam. Again, help us get the lead out. Thank you.
Okay, so I have one quick thing. So on the parks, ma'am, if you have a second, can I catch you after the meeting?
Yes.
I'd appreciate that because, you know, we had an issue, I know, at LCW, and it seems like the RC park seems to be a hotbed. Some kid on a dirt bike, there was an issue. He almost hit some of the baseball players. So I've had conversations with the head of our parks department or the manager of that, Jim Keith, as well as Molly, about what we can do to try to alleviate some of the problems there. That seems to be our hot spot park. There's some things going on there that, you know, I've been witness to it too. My son played baseball there, and I was on the executive board, and that basketball court is just awful at times.
The shame of it is, most of the time, it's been even keeled, but lately it's been getting worse.
Yeah.
And with the amount of officers we have to patrol all of Rotterdam, it not only puts our citizens at risk, but it puts the officers at risk too, because now they're by themselves having to patrol these parks. And then if there's an emergency, and that night there happened to be an emergency, so we had officers all show up because parents were out of control, children were out of control, and no one took responsibility. The officers apologized to me because they said they should have been there, but they couldn't. There was another emergency. So we can't police our town. It's just going to run havoc.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen it firsthand. So if I could catch you for a bit, just
Yes.
before I go into this 30 seconds or whatever, we're good. I've talked to her for, okay, fine.
Is there anybody else that has either miscellaneous or something under liaison reports? And then, go ahead.
Just to address some of the comments that were made about the Super 8 hotel, there have been violations at the hotel that have occurred throughout the year that we have addressed with the hotel, and the hotel has been compliant in addressing those. The reason why the hotel was shut down recently was because of a new issue that had not existed before, where the fire suppression system was not working at all. That means if there's a fire, the alarm's not going off, the wet sprinklers aren't going off, the dry sprinklers aren't going off. If you put this in context of other major fires that we've seen across the road, Notre Dame went up in 15 minutes and it was on fire watch. They had multiple people there watching it, and it still wasn't quick enough to get a fire response out there. Our primary concern for the town was making sure that the people in that building were safe, and in that situation, they were not safe. This is a temporary shutdown until such time as that fire suppression system is fixed, operational, been inspected, and okayed. At that point, the building will no longer be shut down. This is temporary, just as a life safety issue, not as anything other than that. This is different from some of the other codes that were there, which posed an issue, but not quite the danger to people's lives that this particular violation presented. So I just wanted to address that and clear that up. Thank you.
I just have one reminder, in case you didn't know, the annual Memorial Day Parade will start tomorrow at 6:30 from Mahonison High School to Town Hall. We will have food vendors here again, which was nice after walking. A lot of times the people are hungry, whoever participates. And I just want to thank all the veteran groups that come together to organize the parade, but also a big thank you to Megan Griffin. She does a lot of the work. She's the one who sends out all of all the notifications to the different fire departments and everything, lines them all up, catches heck for lining them up in that way. And I just thought that we should give her a little thank you.
This is your third year doing this, correct?
Yeah.
Third year?
If there's nothing else under liaison or miscellaneous,
I'd like to make a motion to enter into executive session for personnel matter related to employee 05222024 with invited guest Elaine Gold.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
I heard Mr. Mastriani
Third.
first, if that's okay. Okay, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastrani?
Yes.
Mrs. Galucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schlad?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
And we're going in executive session with the understanding that Ron needs a minute to talk to
Yeah.
one of our
To talk
residents.
to the resident.
And then we'll
Usually I take a minute to go to the bathroom, but I don't have to go to the bathroom now.